Instead of giving the kids, the anxious kids therapy, they gave the parents therapy. And what did they teach them to do? They taught them to stop over accommodating their kids' anxieties, meaning parents with the best of intentions, they just want to prevent all sources of suffering.
Welcome to the Spartan Up podcast, hosted by Joe De Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan Race, and brought to you by Wild Health.
We are talking about overcoming obstacles. The same way we teach people to get over obstacles on the course, we will teach you here on the Spartan Up podcast to get over obstacles in your mind.
Get fully personalized healthcare based on your DNA, biometrics, and blood work with Wild Health, the official healthcare provider of Spartan. Go to wildhealth.com and use the code Spartan10 to save 10%. This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by 511, the official plate carrier sponsor of the 2022 U.S. Spartan events. Visit 511tactical.com/Spartan. This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Trifecta. Trifecta delivers delicious, macro-balanced meals directly to your door. Use the code Spartan at trifectanutrition.com to save 40% off your first meal plan order.
Joe De Sena here, CEO and founder of Spartan and the Spartan Up podcast. I've got a good one for you today. I got Dr. Tracy Dennis-Tiwary. She is the co-founder of Wise Therapeutics, and she wrote a book called Future Tense. She's an intense researcher, right? You've done research for 20 years and an expert in anxiety. I'm pretty anxious right now. I need some help. What's the story? I'm hearing anxiety is good from your research. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the subtitle of the book is Why Anxiety is Good for You, Even Though It Feels Bad. And the whole premise of the book is this idea that, anxiety, obviously no one likes to feel anxious. It feels terrible. But the stories we tell about anxiety, the metaphors, the perspectives, the views we have are actually unintentionally doing a lot to make anxiety worse and to prime us to do a lot of the more unhelpful things when it comes to productively coping with anxiety. And so really our views of anxiety might be part of the problem of why we're in this crisis of anxiety disorders and mental health problems right now.
So the actual pressure of anxiety, me dealing with trying to get through this COVID nightmare coming out, being in an event business, that's not bad, you're saying, but my perception and my views on feeling anxious, or maybe that's the problem.
It's a big part of the problem. And let me make a distinction between anxiety that's in the normal range and anxiety disorders, because I think that's a really important distinction to make. So anxiety as an emotion is on a spectrum, right? It's not a light switch on and off. Rather, it's a spectrum from just butterflies in the stomach, a little, to full-blown panic, right? But it's still on a spectrum. Now, you can feel intense anxiety every day, but you won't be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder unless your ways of coping with anxiety are getting in your way. So, for example, if you're so anxious about COVID that you start not being able to go to work anymore, to leave the house, these ways that we tend to avoid the things that make us anxious or suppress or use things that are destructive to us to get rid of anxiety. It's the coping that actually is what causes the diagnosis of an anxiety disorder. And the emotion of anxiety is very different than that. Emotion of anxiety, it tells us there's something uncertain in the future. That's why the pandemic has been an incredible time of anxiety, unfortunately, because what's the best word to describe the pandemic, among other things? Uncertainty. All these changes, all this unpredictability. Anxiety tells us that this uncertain future, there's something bad that could happen. You could get COVID, but it also tells you that you might not get COVID if you do the right things and you work to make those good outcomes into reality. So anxiety, the flip side of it, is actually hope, because we're still in it to win it when we're anxious. We have not despaired yet. We're still focused and motivated and persisting in making that uncertain future the one we want to see.
I don't know if this makes sense or not, but when I work out alone, all right, I wake up in the morning, I go and work out. You fill in the blank. Doesn't have to be me. Put yourself in there if you're listening to this. It's kind of relaxing. You're not pushing at 1,000%. As soon as somebody else shows up, there's a little bit of tension, even though it's like below the surface. It might be your best friend and you're not really competing with that person, but all of a sudden it ups the game and the stakes. And all of a sudden, if it's competitive, then now you're even more anxious and up stakes even further. But it pushes you. So is that what you're saying? One of the benefits, like it pushes you into action?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And we unfortunately, and this is where mental health professionals have been part of the problem. I think we've unintentionally conveyed this idea that mental health equals the absence of emotional discomfort. And really, that's not the case of it all. What emotional health is in its purest sense is the ability to navigate the unavoidable ups and downs of life, all of that, the tensions, the suffering. The price of being human is some degree of suffering. And if we don't go through it, we can't just go around it. The only way out is through. And so anxiety, it has to be uncomfortable to wake us up, to make us pay attention. That person walks into the room when you're working out. Hey, we care about how we look to the world. It's giving us that information. And when we start thinking about anxiety as information, as not necessarily a disease all the time or a malfunction, we start to actually tune in and say, hey, wait a second, what is this feeling telling me in the moment? And there's a lot to be learned from it.
So is it any different than I go to the gym? I'm sorry, I keep bringing the
No, it's great.
I go to the gym, and if I don't stress my muscles, they don't grow. If you don't stress your brain and your emotions, you don't grow. Is that a fair way to look at it?
It's great. And that's great because I think our metaphors are our lives, right? So what are the stories we're telling? And this fitness story, right, of anxiety really is a great fit. Because right now, the story and perception that's getting in our way is that it's always a disease. And what do? You don't push through. You eradicate a disease. You prevent it. You avoid it. And so those are the things that spiral anxiety and other difficult emotions out of control. But if you use this more of a fitness metaphor, like what you described, all of a sudden we realize, wait a second, our emotions are anti-fragile, that term that Nassim Nicholas Taleb coined. And muscles are anti-fragile too. Things that require strain and challenge to be optimized. The immune system is anti-fragile. If you don't throw germs and bacteria and viruses at it, it won't learn to work, to mount an immune response. And I believe, and there's amazing evidence to show, that our emotions work the same way. So that's right. If we switch our metaphor from anxiety is always a disease to anxiety is more like physical fitness. It's something we work towards. It's something we persist through. I think we'll be doing a lot more helpful things when it comes to coping with and living with anxiety well.
And by the way, I didn't set up the good doctor here. I mean, we're in the business of putting obstacles in front of people all over the world. And we would argue that it makes you better. And not everybody listens. Most people say, why would I ever do something hard? That doesn't make any sense. If I have a couch and I could order food at my fingertips, like why would I crawl under barbed wire? We would argue because it makes you better. Now, if it was the early 1800s, tell me if you agree with this. If it was the 1500s, I would say that we should probably be selling couches and penicillin.
Yeah.
not
I agree with
right?
you.
we had a lot of emotional stress back then. It was tougher. Life was tougher back then, but now it's a pretty easygoing life for most of us in the first world. The other interesting thing that popped in my head when I was a kid was I had this truck, and I used to clean swimming pools, and I remember every day I had to hire a new person because they would quit on me. I worked too hard, and no one wanted to keep up. They didn't own the business. They were just an employee, and it was just, the work was just too much. And they said, boy, I'm depressed. And I remember thinking, boy, I don't have time to be depressed. I'm so busy. I'm trying to build this business. I'm trying to make payroll. I don't have time to be depressed. Then I thought, I wonder how many people in the third world are depressed because they're trying to make payroll. They're trying to eat. So do we see less anxiety, less reactions to anxiety in places where people are just trying to survive?
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying, I think, is that in some ways, putting a label of, saying I'm depressed, I'm anxious, like it's a debilitating thing, is a luxury. It's a first world problem, right? And there's good evidence to suggest that that might be the case. I mean, the thing about engaging with your anxiety, I'm also a developmentalist by training, so I learned a lot about child development and what you need to do to build emotional strength and resilience. And one thing we know for sure is that if we prevent our kids from working through these if we just label everything as, oh, that's too uncomfortable, or, oh, they're going to get stressed or anxious, and we prevent them from experiencing, they will not build the skills that they need to be able to cope. And you can take this to the level even of treating anxiety disorders in kids. There's a great study, came out of Yale Child Study Center, Ellie Leibovitz and colleagues, and they showed that typically with clinically anxious kids, you give them cognitive behavioral therapy and you help them engage with their anxiety, expose them to it, and then learn different ways of coping where they're not, if they're, say they can't go to school, they have school phobia, right? The social anxiety disorder. You help them gradually get back to school, right? They can't keep avoiding it. So you give them CBT. Well, what this group did at Yale is they, instead of giving the anxious kids therapy, they gave the parents therapy. And what did they teach them to do? They taught them to stop over accommodating their kids' anxieties, meaning parents with the best of intentions, they just want to prevent all sources of suffering. I'm a parent. I don't know if you are, but we don't want to see our kids, right? Oh my God, you got me by 2. I'm only 2. I'm a lightweight. But you know all about this then, that our instinct is to protect them, but that is going to be an opportunity cost when it comes to the real work of what it means to grow up. And so they taught these parents to stop letting their kids stay home from school, stop sleeping in the parents' bed every night, slowly, gradually, supportively. And you see after 6 weeks, those kids whose parents received the therapy, they were doing just as well in terms of reductions in anxiety as the kids who got therapy themselves. So this is a crucial lesson I think we should all take, not to throw our kids necessarily into the deep end, but they're not fragile. They're anti-fragile. They can work through these emotions. And it's our job as parents really to help support them in doing that, from my view and from what I have read from the science.
Since you and I don't know each other, you wouldn't be aware that we put on an annual kids camp every year on the farm in Vermont where this was all started. And it's called the Death Camp. It's called Kids Death Camp. And it's exactly that. I mean, it's as if the kids entered, Navy SEAL BUDS training, and they're woken up with ice cold water at 5 a.m. and they're screamed at, and they're forced to swim and carry rocks up mountains. And you're going to love this. Unbeknownst to me, at the end of the day, they would get on their phones and text their parents, which was normal. Stay in touch with your parents.
Yeah.
I didn't know they were texting their parents, get me the hell out of here.
You are unique, but is healthcare treating you that way? I'm Dr. Matt Dawson with Wild Health, Spartan's official healthcare partner, and we're bringing you these quick medical tips every week. And today we're going to talk about precision medicine. Precision medicine is probably a term that you've heard, and what it really is just a data-driven approach. Right now in medicine, when you see a physician, you're getting advice based on what works for most people. But you're unique, you have unique DNA, and it should be taken into account. So precision medicine is taking that DNA, all the advantages and disadvantages you have, combining that with blood work, how you feel and perform right now, also maybe your microbiome and lifestyle factors that we can't measure but are important. If all of those are combined, you can get a much better picture and more precise recommendations. For example, if you have a VDR SNP in your genetics, you may need more vitamin D. But what is your vitamin D level on your blood testing? And where do you live? Are you in Florida in the summer or Alaska in the winter, which is going to dramatically affect your vitamin D levels? All of that information should be taken into account for the recommendation of should you or shouldn't you take a vitamin D supplement, not just giving it to everyone or no one. That's what precision medicine is. That's what we can do today, tell you how you should eat, what are the right foods for you, what is the right exercise, supplements, and medications for you. The fact that we can do it means we should do it. You should demand it. You should find someone who is doing this, or ask your doctor to get the education to be able to do it. You deserve precision medicine and to be treated uniquely.
Wild Health, the official healthcare provider of Spartan. This episode is also sponsored by 511, the official plate carrier sponsor of the 2022 U.S. Spartan events. 511 is a global innovator in tactical and technical apparel, footwear, and purpose-built gear. You've seen our athletes wearing their vests. 511 is also hosting Spartan Workout Tour events at select 511 retail stores. These include 90-minute bodyweight training sessions, challenging the mind and the body, catering to all levels of fitness. Everyone is encouraged to join. And you could enter to win 511's TAC Tech plate carrier at select Spartan Honor Series, Stadium, and Workout Tour events. And last but not least, visit 511 at 15 different Spartan races throughout the year to take part in their 511 Fitness Challenge. Go up against Spartan racers, earn exclusive branded 511 Spartan dog tags, and you can get 20% off your next 511 purchase. Find out more at 511tactical.com/Spartan. 511, always be ready. We'll be right back to this interview, but first, a quick message from Trifecta.
We started Trifecta with a very singular mission: to get America into shape. We were really interested in launching a business that was able to actually directly help people. That happened to be us helping with the chronic disease crisis that's caused by nutrition. We make it with organic ingredients, macro balanced meals, fully biodegradable packaging.
Trifecta's here. Oh yeah!
We have an amazing company mission to help get America back into shape.
Use the code SPARTAN at trifectanutrition.com to save 40% off your first meal plan order. Now back to the interview.
Unbeknownst to me, at the end of the day, they would get on their phones and text their parents, which was normal. Stay in touch with your parents.
Yeah.
I didn't know they were texting their parents, get me the hell out of here. This guy is crazy. This is not a camp. This is a prison camp.
Yeah.
And then invariably, though, when you talk to the children post-camp and later on, it's the best thing they ever did.
Yeah.
They turned into little men and women. And if the parents were around, they would have called a timeout and extracted their children in 2 seconds because it was too hard. But at the end of the day, like, what we were doing is stuff that in the 1960s and 70s and 50s that normal kids would have did every day. There's nothing abnormal about hiking a mountain and waking up early. I mean, what if you were a kid that grew up in a farm family?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about the throwing ice cold water on them, though, in the 50s and 60s, but maybe they did. I'm a Gen Xer myself. But But I think that this principle, it holds so true because I'm sure that they also learned how much strength they had. So that this story, again, it comes down to these stories that we tell ourselves about our emotional resilience and what we're capable of. Now, I'm still a clinical psychologist, and I do want to say anxiety disorders are real. There are a lot of people out there struggling every day who have things that life has thrown at them that needs extra support. So I really, I'm saying this not to underestimate or disrespect what people have to go through in their lives. And a lot of us are privileged to have more resources than others. At the same time, this way of approaching our difficult emotions, I think, stays the same. Because when we know that there actually is a right way to be anxious, we learn the skills to tell the difference between healthy and unhealthy anxiety, to evaluate the coping that we're using in our life. And do we want to cope in that way and to have more choice? So it's an empowering viewpoint. It's not meant to be a judgmental viewpoint or a just pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. I do just want to clarify that as well.
No, that makes perfect sense for the majority of us. Look, when I think about COVID and I think about being asked to stay in your homes and hide from this potentially very dangerous virus, it made sense for a week or 2 or 3, but 2 years of being in and out of your house and hiding from something, I think exasperated what you're talking about, because maybe we taught the whole world to not face the music. Like, I don't know. Am I thinking about that right? Because certainly there's a lot of people that died, and we should have protected the elderly and those at high risk. But I don't know, like you said, our immune systems need to deal with bugs and germs. Right?
And there's some nuance to that, right? Because we were talking about the physical, which is intertwined with the emotional. But there's also, here's one thing I'll say about that, which is that we assumed that the pandemic absolutely bottomed out everyone's mental health. Because I was in New York for a good part of the time. I mean, people really, when we were in lockdown, when everyone was in lockdown, it was brutal. And we assumed that when going through that just made all of us essentially get to the point of having mental health disorders. The truth is much more nuanced than that. The truth is that a lot of people actually, when they were, locked down with their family, a lot of people found new avenues of support. They developed new hobbies, even kids who were vulnerable. We did a study with 12 other research labs where we showed that kids who were anxious before the pandemic a lot of them actually didn't get worse at all. And some of them actually were resilient. A study coming out of the University of Pittsburgh showed that a lot of kids during lockdown, those who actually discovered a new talent or an activity, and they focused in on girls in this study, girls who were able to create things and picked up new hobbies, they actually did better during the lockdown. So I think that, again, the story of, can we build resilience instead of assuming we're not up to the task? How much can we do that in our life? The more we do that, I think the more we'll prove ourselves that we can do much better than we might have thought.
What would 3 tips be to those at home that maybe have not done all the research you've done, right? Give me 3 tips to make, I know my tips would be like take a cold shower, do burpees every morning.
and they might be with mine. But I say, really, I take as the first premise, anxiety is information. So my tips have to do with reframing this, not as, again, it's not all bad, it's not a malfunction. Tune in for a minute. So the first tip is be curious about anxiety before assuming that it means something's wrong or that there's a malfunction. Listen to what it might tell you. Anxiety tells you what you care about in the world. We're only anxious when we care. So if you're anxious about that job interview tomorrow, it's because you care. And yes, you could bomb it, but you could also crush it. And anxiety can be your helpmate in preparing for it, persisting, and focusing. So that's the first thing. Be curious and listen to anxiety. Also, as you do that, know that sometimes anxiety doesn't give you helpful information. Sometimes it's useless. It's free floating. You need to let go of it. So do something that immerses you back in the present moment. A lot of people love to exercise, and it brings us right into our bodies, right into the moment, and letting go of that future tense that can sometimes spiral us into worries. Some people love to write poetry. I write very bad poetry, but I love it, Joe. So I write poetry. It breaks me out of whatever I'm thinking about. We can do these things. So we might want to go to see our therapist, a great friend. Do something that allows you to let go of that future and immerse yourself back in the present. And then with the energizing, persistent, the focus of creativity that anxiety can give us, hitch that to a sense of purpose, something that's important to you in life, whether that's some grand mission or whether that's just doing something more in your life that you really care about, something that you want to increase your connection in your neighborhood or start to do good in the world or just eat more, apples every day. Whatever it is, you can connect that anxiety to drive you to pursue those goals, things you care about.
Oh, it sounds like you got an anxious dog.
Oh my gosh, I could tell you about that. Of course, since I wrote a book about anxiety, I have the most anxious dog on the planet. I'm hoping someone will come and grab him. They know that I'm on a podcast now, but we'll see. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. How do people find you?
drtracyphd.com, and you can read all about the book and my research and other things there.
You're awesome. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for playing along, and thanks for vindicating us. 21 years of telling people to go up, over, and through the obstacles rather than around them. You have vindicated us because I was just Crazy Joe. Now I'm backed by.
I don't know.
I'm
they might call me Crazy Tracy, so I don't know.
Crazy Tracy. You're awesome.
Thanks so much, Joe. Really appreciate speaking with you.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Trifecta. Trifecta delivers delicious, macro-balanced meals directly to your door. Use the code SPARTAN at trifectanutrition.com to save 40% off your first meal plan order. This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by 511, the official plate carrier sponsor of the 2022 U.S. Spartan events. Visit 511tactical.com/Spartan. Maximize energy, optimize nutrition, and improve performance with Wild Health. Personalized precision healthcare built for Spartans. You'll get a personalized health plan based on your DNA and biometrics and the support of a team of health experts. Sign up at wildhealth.com with the code SPARTAN10 to save 10%.